In today's video, I am bringing you 10 names in Dynasty Fantasy Football whose value is at massive stake during the 2026 offseason. These are guys who could rise or fall a ton in Dynasty value based on how the offseason plays out. Earlier this week, I went over my Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. Those assets were the safest in Dynasty Fantasy Football. These guys today are pretty much the opposite of that. Very volatile assets whose value will depend a ton on what happens through the NFL draft and through free agency. Maybe some of these guys are free agents themselves. Maybe their team could potentially sign a free agent or draft somebody to replace them. Either way, the NFL offseason will impact the value of these players a ton, not only in 2026, but long term as well. If you are looking for some more Dynasty Fantasy Football content this offseason, check out my Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast, The Dynasty Arsenal. Link will be in the description. With all that out the way, let's get into the first name. I touched on this very briefly in my Cornerstone Rankings video, but whether or not George Pickens signs a contract extension with the Cowboys will have a massive impact on his value for me personally, and I believe the market as well. Through the first 3 years of George Pickens' NFL career, he averaged 11.6 points per game. And while he showed flashes of the elite receiver he was in college and turned out to be with the Cowboys, he never consistently produced like that as a Pittsburgh Steeler. The efficiency metrics clearly show that this was very largely an issue of situation as opposed to talent. The Steelers' situation for Pickens was really, really bad his entire time there. I mean, just looking at the list of quarterbacks he dealt with, Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields were the 5 quarterbacks that George Pickens had throwing him the ball through the first 3 years of his NFL career. It genuinely could not have been much worse for Pickens in Pittsburgh. His target share over his first 3 years was 22%. His yards per route run was at 2.13. In 2025, with the Cowboys, those efficiency metrics did not jump very much. He had a 23% target share, up from 22 in Dallas in 2025, and his yards per route run was up to 2.57. Yet his points per game jumped from 11.6 to 17.2. Dak Prescott had 600 pass attempts in 2025, which was the second highest total in the entire league. Pickens being the number 2 option in this high passing volume offense is the best case scenario for his skill set. There isn't another landing spot in the NFL that would have me as excited for him going forward as I would be if he remains a Dallas Cowboy. In terms of speculating whether he will stay with Dallas or not, the franchise tag is something to talk about. It's at $28.1 million this offseason for a wide receiver, which would give Pickens the 9th highest cap hit in 2026 at the wide receiver position. His cap hit on the open market would probably be pretty close to that franchise tag number because of the incredible season he had in 2025, and Jerry Jones may just full stop not want to pay him that. And so if Jerry does what Jerry is capable of doing and Pickens leaves somehow, whether it's a sign and trade or just walking through free agency, I think we could see a massive value drop for Pickens. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys should absolutely keep Pickens in Dallas. It is clearly the best decision for them to make for their offense, but I just can't be confident that Jerry Jones is going to do that. This is the guy who traded Micah Parsons. This is the guy who constantly is having these issues with contract negotiations with his star players. And so it would not surprise me whatsoever if George Pickens ends up on another team in 2026. The Cowboys also have 2 first-round picks at number 12 and number 20 overall. Is there a situation where they rather let Pickens walk, they get a comp pick for him, and then they grab a Mekhi Lemon, a Jordan Tyson, a Carnell Tate in the NFL draft? That would definitely be a cheaper option, and they'd be able to potentially spend the Pickens money on defense. There is no doubt that Pickens would be coveted in free agency. He's the best free agent wide receiver by a mile. The second best would be like Alec Pierce or Wan'Dale Robinson. There's a huge gap in those tiers. I would be very worried if he does hit free agency about him ending up on an offense which won't throw the ball nearly as much. And it could be a situation where he's dealing with bad quarterback play like he was in Pittsburgh. Even if he's projected to be the number 1 option, we saw him in Pittsburgh for 3 years be that number 1 option and not produce for fantasy whatsoever. So in my opinion, Pickens is a highly volatile asset this offseason. For all of my shares, I am praying that he stays in Dallas. His dynasty price is currently obviously very high because of what we saw him capable of in 2025. And I don't think he is a sell by any means. You can see my ranking compared to the experts on flockfantasy.com and Keep Trade Cut. But I also don't love buying in at this current price. Unless you are supremely confident that he is going to be in Dallas long term, which I am not. I don't love getting in here because even if I have him as wide receiver 8 right now, if he ends up in a terrible situation close to what he was dealing with in Pittsburgh, even with what we saw him capable of in 2025, I would have to drop his ranking a ton. Travis Hunter is the next name on today's list, and there is a ton at stake for a lot of this Jaguars offense this offseason. Now, I'll get to Travis Etienne in a little bit. He is in the video today. Brian Thomas Jr. is not on the list today. And that is because while his value is definitely a big question mark right now, people aren't really sure where to value him with the incredible rookie season and the really bad year 2. I'm not sure if him staying in Jacksonville versus getting traded would change a whole lot. I think his value is probably going to be pretty stagnant throughout the offseason. If he gets moved to a crazy landing spot like the Patriots or the Bills, then yeah, obviously I think his value would increase a little bit. But largely, the questions around Brian Thomas are his ability and whether he's bought in the drops, things like that. So he's not on the video today. I do want to focus more on Travis Hunter, who has everything at stake this offseason for his fantasy football value, because through a full offseason program, one where he's not dealing with the draft process and the combine and things like that, we should figure out a ton about how the Jaguars want to use him going forward. The Jags general manager, James Gladstone, mentioned that there will be an emphasis on the defensive side of the ball. Fantasy football managers do not want to hear that. But the way that the question was worded and the answer that he gave didn't really give a ton of insight into how the split will play out specifically, just that he will be playing on the defense as well as the offense. But I do believe that throughout the offseason, how they treat their wide receiver room and their cornerback room through free agency and the draft will tell us a good amount about their plans for Travis Hunter. Currently, I would go as far to say that Travis Hunter is the hardest player to value in Dynasty Fantasy Football. In a recent startup mock that I did on my Dynasty podcast, go check it out. As always, link is in the description. He landed in the 7th round of the startup. His potential, not only as a prospect, but the little flashes that he did show as a rookie before he got hurt, should have him way higher than this. But because there is also the potential that he is a full-time cornerback and plays 10% of offensive snaps, just special packages and red zone stuff, things like that, he could be a 0 for fantasy football. I cannot remember another asset with a wider range of outcomes in my time playing fantasy football than Travis Hunter currently. If you want to get out now at this price, I completely understand it, and I would not begrudge that whatsoever. To just move on to another asset who, not as high of upside, but also a way safer floor, I think that's absolutely fine. I'm hanging on to the fact that if he does hit, and if he does play a lot of snaps at wide receiver and is great, like I think he has the potential to be, he could be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL and in Dynasty. There is a bunch of all or nothing nature to Travis Hunter's Dynasty value, and I believe that this offseason will tell us a lot about which direction his value is headed. Breece Hall kicks off the conversations about the 4 big name free agent running backs, and I think out of those 4, Breece Hall is potentially the most likely to see a change of scenery in 2026. The talk all last offseason and leading into the season was that Breece Hall believes that he is a 3-down workhorse, and I think a lot of us who watch him believe the same thing, and that he is an elite running back in the NFL that can dominate a backfield. The Jets viewed it differently. And even Breece himself was saying, I'm not their guy. Things like that. Talking about the new regime with Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji, how they didn't draft him. They have no commitment to him. Now, a lot can change in a year, obviously. Maybe the Jets want to bring Breece back as a stable option in the run game while the rest of the offense is so up in the air, not knowing who the quarterback is and all that. Or maybe it goes as we've suspected all year and he becomes a free agent. Breece is undoubtedly incredibly talented, and he's really been held back by this offense being so awful his entire time as a New York Jet. His production as a receiver was the main reason why he finished as the running back 2 overall in 2023, but it fell off a cliff this past year with a combination of Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, Brady Cook, played some games for the Jets at quarterback, but he did have his first 1,000-yard rushing season in 2025, which is good to see. And he was very solid at 4.4 yards per carry. The Jets' offensive line is very good. I believe that Breece would absolutely thrive in a high-powered offense that wants to design their run game around him. The issue is, for me right now, he's being valued as if it's a guarantee he goes to a great landing spot. In terms of dynasty value, he is miles ahead of the other 3 free agent running backs in the consensus rankings. And there is a legitimate world where after free agency, once we know where all 4 of these guys are playing for the next several years, I could have him last out of the 4 names. Everybody wants their favorite running back to go to the Chiefs, but only one running back can go there. And bad teams pay running backs all the time. We have these great memories of the 2024 offseason where Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry all moved to great landing spots and were incredible. But there is zero guarantee that Breece ends up in a situation as good as we are hoping and projecting right now. His market value for me currently is a little rich. I would personally be looking to pivot, even if it's to another free agent like Kenneth Walker, who I'm about to talk about, where you could get a pretty decent plus on top. Speaking of Kenneth Walker, he is a super tough evaluation this offseason as well, because all year I was absolutely convinced that the Seahawks would move on and he would be a free agent. They clearly don't value him enough to give him a big workload. At least they didn't show that the past few seasons. And I believe that another team would see his talent, see his big play, explosive ability, and want to build their run game around him. And because of that, they would be willing to pay him a lot more than the Seahawks would be. But then Charbonnet tears his ACL in the playoffs, and now the situation has changed completely. That factor, combined with his playoff performances so far, where he has been the workhorse and has been incredible with a big workload, I believe that the price that the Seahawks are willing to pay him has probably gone up. They also have to consider now that Charbonnet won't be healthy to start 2026. And Kenneth Walker will be, and they know that he can handle the workload until Charbonnet comes back. I do believe that Kenneth Walker's play style, the big play hunting, always trying to bounce everything to the outside, means that he'll always be in some form of a committee. At least there will always be another running back in the offense that can get those more surefire 3-4 yard gains, like a Zach Charbonnet. Because with Kenneth Walker, you have to take the bad with the good. If you want the plays where he bounces it to the outside and turns a completely blocked running lane into a 20-yard gain, you also have to deal with the 5-yard losses where he keeps spinning and going backwards. Like I mentioned, Zach Charbonnet is just the perfect complement for that. He's no nonsense, run up the middle, take what's given to you. If Kenneth Walker does stay in Seattle, the best case scenario is that he dominates the backfield to open 2026 with Zach Charbonnet hurt. And then when Charbonnet comes back, he's still recovering from the injury and he doesn't take a huge share of the workload. And then Zach Charbonnet is a free agent next offseason. And he's probably not going to be worth a whole lot because he will have been coming off a year where he was injured for the first half and then when he came back didn't do a whole lot. It's for that reason that I believe that his value isn't as volatile as a name like Breece Hall this offseason because of the Charbonnet injury. Those factors lead me to believe that Kenneth Walker's value isn't as volatile as a name like Breece Hall. But a big contract or a change of scenery, which I think is less likely now than I did a month ago, would definitely trigger a value shift for Kenneth Walker, but it's most likely an increase. I don't see a world in which a team where he'd be in a worse situation than Seattle pays him a ton of money. I really like buying Kenneth Walker right now because I don't think his value has much place to go other than up. Travis Etienne up next, and he is the oldest of the free agent running backs, just turned 27 and had a great year in 2025 with Liam Cohen coming in and designing a great run game. Etienne is a very interesting case to me because you would think that, he had a great year and the Jags would want him to come back, but he's going to command a pretty decent contract. The Jags are paying huge money for their quarterback, 50 plus million per year. I think it's more likely than not he's back in Jacksonville, but I wouldn't close the door on them letting him walk, grabbing a lower cost option in free agency to pair with Bashal Tootin, who I believe that they do really like. I think that him staying in Jacksonville is close to the best case scenario for Travis Etienne, and a big contract would be a great sign that they're committed to having him as the lead in this backfield. I would worry about him ending up in somewhat of a committee on a worse team, Same thing as Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker. But I am very happy buying Travis Etienne right now, despite that. I think that the bad case scenario of him ending up in a worse situation is already baked into his current market value. While he is 27 years old, he's only 4 years into his NFL career, and I see him being productive each of the next 3 years, which is that window that we love to play Dynasty in. The final free agent running back is Javonte Williams, and it's a very similar conversation to the one with Travis Etienne. In Javonte's third season removed from his major knee injury, he finally has a breakout. And I only mention the knee injury because it's one of the few possible explanations as to why he couldn't produce in Denver but was great in 2025 on the Cowboys. It puzzles me that Javonte couldn't even touch what J.K. Dobbins did in this Denver offense in 2025. And so while maybe there's some underlying Sean Payton scheme explanation, I think him being another year removed from the knee injury absolutely played a role in his 2025 breakout. Now, absolutely everything I said for Travis Etienne in terms of where his value could go applies to Javonte Williams. In terms of the Cowboys situation, I talked about with George Pickens that they might not want to pay him. Maybe they don't want to invest a ton of money into quarterback and 2 wide receivers. Now you add a running back. On top of that, it becomes almost untenable to put that much big money into your offense. I don't think Javonte is going to command top of the market money. I don't think he'll get paid as much as Breece Hall will. And that's especially in a year with 3 other high-profile free agents. But he's definitely going to be on the more expensive side. And we just saw the Cowboys let Rico Dowdle walk after he put up 1,000 yards for them in 2024. I think this might shock some people, but I would predict Javonte Williams is playing on a different team in 2026. And that does scare me a little bit. The Cowboys situation was pretty perfect for him. A high-powered offense, no real competition for touches, and a ton of touchdown opportunities. If he walks in free agency, it is unlikely he finds a situation as good as he has in Dallas. I'm kind of looking around to see what the market is for Javonte and maybe trying to pivot elsewhere. I would love to pivot off of him to Kenneth Walker or Travis Etienne, who are kind of similar assets at the moment. Kyler Murray up next, and there is so much at play when discussing Kyler Murray's offseason, and a lot of that conversation is fueled by the questions of a potential soft benching when he was minorly injured during the 2025 season, where Jacoby Brissett came in and threw for a ton of yards and made Trey McBride and Michael Wilson great and yada, yada, yada. I am personally choosing to believe that this is not the case, that he did not get soft bench, that he was actually injured. Teams are often perfectly fine sharing that they're benching somebody, even a star quarterback. I don't necessarily believe, or maybe I don't want to believe, that it's possible that the Cardinals played up his injury in order to save face or protect his reputation. Regardless of whether he was benched or not, it is possible that he is on a different team in 2026. If I'm understanding the contract correctly, and if anyone smarter than me with the salary cap stuff wants to leave a comment and explain it better, that would be great. But the Cardinals could save plenty of money against the cap with a trade this offseason. And they would also save a little bit of money if they designated him as a post-June 1st release. Now, in terms of a trade, does another team think Kyler is good enough to take on what is left of his huge contract? I'm not sure. In the case of the post-June 1st release, the Cardinals would still have to pay Kyler to not play for them, even though they would be saving money overall against the cap. Do they see that as worth it? At the time of this recording, a new head coach has not been named for the Cardinals, but whoever that is, whoever is running the offense, will undoubtedly have a say in the Kyler Murray landing spot for 2026. And Kyler is a quarterback who requires a very specifically designed offense. His height limitations are very real, and he's so good out of structure, which is a great quality to have. But when he struggles so much within the structure of an offense, to me personally, it seems impossible to imagine how you would design that type of offense for a quarterback with this specific skill set. I do believe, however, that there are huge egos in the NFL. And somebody, whether it's the coach who comes into Arizona, Clint Kubiak, whoever, or another quarterback needy team, will believe that they can get great things out of him because we know that he is so talented. In 2024, just a year ago, he was the quarterback 10 overall, largely because of this great rushing floor that he can provide. And I think that the only reason his value is so low right now is because the market and a lot of people are thinking that he did get benched and that he's just bad now. But this is something that was never confirmed or corroborated to my knowledge whatsoever. Last offseason, he was still going in the third, fourth round of startups, and now he's down in the eighth, just left for dead in quarterback purgatory. I mentioned Clint Kubiak as a potential head coach. Let's say they hire him, or another bright offensive mind, whatever. But Clint Kubiak is currently the favorite for that job or the Raiders. Let's say they hire Clint Kubiak, and then he immediately commits to Kyler as the team's quarterback going forward. I think Kyler's value immediately rises from that point. And Kyler's currently being valued around like Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones coming off the torn Achilles, and guys like JJ McCarthy, who may not start another game, Shadur Sanders, these types of guys. The upside with Kyler Murray is miles higher than any of those options. And so I love Kyler as a buy right now. Brandon Aiyuk is a simple one for me. This is an incredibly talented player who, for whatever reason, had a falling out with the 49ers staff through his recovery from the ACL tear, which he sustained in 2024. And now the general manager has already said that he will be playing somewhere else in 2026. I believe that his value is in line for a huge rise in the coming months of the offseason. When he does get moved and end up somewhere else, and the market starts discussing his name again, I believe that his value will definitely shoot upwards, and that's relatively regardless of where he goes. There's a lot of talk of him potentially reuniting with his college quarterback Jaden Daniels, or a team like the New England Patriots could take a shot on a low-cost, high-upside guy that could be the number one receiver for Drake May in 2026. He's 28 years old, and he's being valued on the expert average around the other vet wide receivers, who, in my opinion, don't have anywhere close to the upside in terms of value increase or point potential. I don't have any clue what's going on with the valuation on Keep Trade Cut. I don't necessarily want to take that wide receiver 68 number and try to value him like that in my leagues and send out insulting offers. But I do think that there's a great buying window right now before the offseason talk starts and he ends up somewhere else. It's important to mention that there won't be any injury concern because we'll be close to 2 years removed from the ACL tear when the 2026 season starts. I believe Brandon Aiyuk has the potential to be the biggest contender buy of the offseason, similar to how Davante Adams was treated a year ago. Trey Benson also has a ton at stake this offseason. Through 2 years of his NFL career, he has managed less than 500 rushing yards. He has had spots where he's shown flashes of being great, mainly as a rookie in 2024. But in 2025, right when it looked like it was Trey Benson's season with James Conner getting hurt, Benson goes down with his own injury, and that ended up sidelining him for the entire year. Now he's heading into year 3, where a new coaching staff is coming into the building, and they have no proof whatsoever that he can handle a full workload. His time is running out very fast to be the fantasy relevant running back that we thought he had the potential to be coming out of Florida State. The Cardinals could do something as crazy as take Jeremiah Love with their first pick in the NFL draft. If they don't draft a high-profile rookie running back, I would be shocked if they didn't dip into free agency and add serious competition for Benson in this backfield, even to the point of bringing in a star who would turn Trey Benson into a true backup handcuff option. This situation actually reminds me a lot of Tyjae Spears, who was a pretty good prospect. He was stuck behind a veteran, Derrick Henry, and then when it looked like it was wheels up for Tajay when Henry was leaving and going to the Ravens, a new regime immediately signed Tony Pollard, and the dream was dead, and Tajay's done nothing since then. If you believe that Trey Benson still has the potential to be the running back one for the Cardinals and relevant for fantasy, I think that this is the time to buy him, but his value is at a point right now where we could see a massive drop by the time we get to May and the draft and free agency have all played out. Our last name today is Kyle Pitts, and he is coming off a year where he finished as the tight end 2 in overall fantasy points. But do not be fooled. Over 20% of his fantasy points came in one game, the crazy Thursday night blow-up against the Buccaneers. That huge performance aside, this was the best year of his career so far. And it seems clear that the Falcons somewhat figured out how to unlock him within this offense. But now you have the new coaching staff in Atlanta, and Kyle Pitts is a free agent. Tight end is definitely the most scheme-dependent position in fantasy football. We've seen certain offenses love to feature them, like Mike McDaniel, what he did with Jonnu Smith in 2024, Darren Waller and Greg Dulcich in 2025 a little bit, but others just don't have them involved much in the passing game. And Pitts, while he's never lived up to the 4th overall pick and prospect hype, he has shown flashes of being a great player. And in the right situation with some serious financial commitment, I think he could definitely thrive. The market is very sharp with how they're valuing Kyle Pitts. They're not being duped by his big blow up game. And what is mentioned every time Kyle Pitts is brought up is how young he is. And it's because he's true. He was an insanely young prospect. We're 5 years through his NFL career, and he's still only 25 years old. I think a lot of people would be excited for him to stay in Atlanta with Kevin Stefanski coming in. I would only be excited about that if it's like huge top of the market tight end money that they pay him to stay there. If he gets this middling contract, I would expect more of the same from him. But a big contract for Kyle Pitts would tell me that Kevin Stefanski has a vision for how he wants to use him in this offense. And if he gets a big contract elsewhere, I'll be excited as well. The attractiveness of that landing spot would obviously determine a ton how much his value would rise. Because imagine he signs with the Chiefs, or the Chargers, or the Patriots, or the Eagles, or the Broncos. I could go on and on. There are so few elite tight ends that there ends up being a plethora of very attractive landing spots. And the hype alone at one of those places with a big contract would result in a huge spike in value for Kyle Pitts. And so I really like buying at this current price right now. So those are my picks for the players with the most at stake during the 2026 Dynasty Fantasy Football offseason. Let me know in the comments who you think I missed, who your favorite names are for players with the most at stake this offseason. As always, if you're looking for more Dynasty content, check out my fantasy football podcast, The Dynasty Arsenal. Link will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Hit the like if you liked it. Hit the subscribe if you really liked it. And I will see you all in the next one.